Welcome to SolarWinds MSP RMM Dashboard Demo. Today we're going to show you the basic layout and navigation of the RMM dashboard. So, Daniel, can you give us an introduction?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Eric. We've designed this platform so that you can efficiently secure, maintain, and manage your devices from a single pane. As you said, first we'll start out with just the basic layout. So you'll see the dashboard is divided into three primary panes. We have the west pane over here on the left of your screen that houses your clients and your sites. The north pane will show all of the devices associated with the selected client or site. And we'll dive into this in more detail here in a moment, but you see we have a bunch of icons. These all refer to the features that are running. The green checks tell you when things are functioning properly. Over here you notice we're seeing some red, which means we have some failed checks as well in our dashboard. That's just going to help you manage all of your basic day-to-day operations.
Yeah, Daniel, one of the things that really impressed me about the dashboard when I was going through and picking what I was going to use in my MSP is that all of the errors float to the top. If you look over there at the west pane, the customers that have errors in them, that's not in alphabetical order for a reason. It's because those things float to the top. Same thing carries over to the north pane. If you have devices in the north pane that have errors, those are going to float to the top. Likewise, in the south pane, when you're on the checks tab, those errors are going to float to the top as well. So it's very easy to see those things that need to be taken care of right away.
No, you're absolutely right. The organization there is important. It just brings the errors to your attention so that you can work efficiently. Don't have to go searching for problems. Now that you've mentioned the south pane, the third pane in the dashboard, you'll see a number of tabs here. We'll start with the summary tab. It's just give you some basic information about the device itself and which features are running. We have an outages and a checks tab. The checks tab will be your default tab, which shows you, not surprisingly, all the checks that we're running on the device, everything that we're monitoring, and as Eric pointed out, failures will float to the top. The outages tab is just a summary of those failures over time. You can add custom notes. We have an automated tasks tab that will show you all manner of things that have been associated with the device. We'll come back to that later as we focus on automation. We also have an assets tab. The assets tab will show you a snapshot of all the hardware and software currently installed on that device. We also have a quick navigation bar here on the left of your screen. What you see now is called the Devices view. We also have a dashboard view. This dashboard view is a high-level graphical representation of your dashboard, and all the widgets that you see are interactive, so it's easy for me to drill into any issues. You can also create custom filters. So there's a number of things that you may want to find quickly in your dashboard. You can give all these names, simple descriptions, and you see here whether it's a device, a client, a particular feature, check, or task, you can create custom filters to find it. For instance here, Windows will soon be ending support for Windows 7, so we created a custom filter to find all of the Windows 7 operating systems in our dashboard. We also have what's called the Asset Tracking view. Similar to the Assets tab in the south pane that showed you the hardware and software on a device, this will show you the hardware or software at a client or site. It's a great way to keep a quick inventory of everything that you're responsible for managing. You'll notice here you can also keep track of licensed software. Just takes a bit of configuration and it's easy to manage. Lastly, we have the wall chart. This is a helpful way to keep an eye on all the failures in your dashboard. You'll notice in the upper right-hand corner we have an Open in New Window button. It's very common for an MSP to just put this on a separate monitor and leave it up throughout the day so that your techs can keep an eye on where they need to be working. That's the basic layout of the dashboard. Now we'll turn to some of the specific features and functionality available to you in the tool.
This time we're going to be showing you how to configure your settings and those settings for the individual features.
Thank you very much, Eric. And to do so, we're going to start in the Settings option from the top menu. The first options that you see are all about the settings and alerts in your dashboard. We're going to move down here to the lower half of the drop-down menu, which is all about controlling the features. We'll start with Take Control, and you'll notice if I hover here for a moment, there are two things. There's a policy and a settings. You'll see this for almost every option in the dashboard. Essentially, this is configuration of the feature itself and a secondary settings menu for deployment, so controlling which client or site will receive the settings for the feature that you're working with. Here I only see a policy and a settings. If other options are needed, for example patch management, you'll see those options from the settings drop down as well. We'll come back to patch management for more details here in a bit. For now, let's stick with Take Control. I'm just going to open the policy, and we'll use this default policy as an example. Now, I won't belabor each option, but basically, inside of this policy, we can request a user permission for access if we want, customize the message, customize screen timeouts, that type of thing. The point is, you'll have very granular control over each option. And keep in mind, different clients have different needs, different preferences. It's easy. It only takes a couple of minutes to deploy a policy for each individual user. Once your policy is properly configured, you can just select the device in the north pane of the dashboard. And I have two options above that, Take Control and Remote Background. I'll just click Take Control. Perfect. Now my remote connection is established. I can do basically anything that you would need to do. I have all sorts of interactions with the end user, remote commands that I can send. The file transfer window is very simple, easy drag and drop interface. I can get some basic information about the device itself, even chat with the end user if I need to. Once you're done, just close the window. We also have the remote background option. I like this option because it is entirely transparent to the end user. They'll never know that you were there. So I can log in, I can get any information that I need to get from the device. I can even handle remote processes and services. So if the user calls you and tells you that they can't print, I can simply find the print spooler here in the menu. I can stop it, start it, do whatever I needed to do. Again, in and out without interrupting the end user in any way. Eric, in your experience as an MSP, was there any particular functionality that you found most beneficial out of the remote background manager?
Oh, so there were a couple, right? Most of the time, what we were dealing with were print issues like you just showed, with the print spooler being able to restart services like that. One of the other examples that I can think of a lot was the QuickBooks Database Manager. We were resetting that one constantly. We eventually solved that issue by using automation, which I know you'll talk about later.
We'll get to that for sure. Thank you very much for the insight. Well, now that we're done with Take Control, and I hope that everyone has a good grasp on using the settings menu, this really is the heart of the dashboard for the configuration and deployment of all the features. We're going to take through a couple of the most popular features one by one to give you a better idea of how you can utilize the tool set.
In this session, we're going to be talking about two of the very important layers of security that you can add to your RMM dashboard and the devices attached thereto. Those are Managed Antivirus and the web filtering product, also known as Web Protection.
Thank you very much, Eric. And once again, we'll start up here in Settings from the top menu. I'm going to scroll down and we'll start with Managed Antivirus. Just as you saw before, we have Policies and Settings. We're going to start with a policy to configure the options for Managed Antivirus. I'm just going to select the desktop policy as an example. And now we'll configure. So under General, it's very basic options. You can see them all there. One of those is the level of end user interaction, whether or not you want them to see an icon in their taskbar or notifications from the product. Then we'll come to Installation Settings. Notice that this is a white label solution. If you are allowing your end user to see those notifications and the icon in their system tray, make sure that you brand it appropriately so they don't see our generic terminology. You'll also have the options to configure scans in the policy. Those include the quick and the deep scan. You'll notice between these two, it's the same menu. They're just customizable. The quick scan is designed to be lighter weight by default out of the box settings here, and the deep scan is far more intrusive. You'll notice it applies to all fixed and removable drives. We also have Active Protection, which simply scans files as they are accessed. Then we have Behavioral Scanning. This is a heuristic scan in which all processes are scored in real time. If a score gets too high, the system will perceive it as a threat and then take whichever action that you've specified here in your policy settings. You can also set custom exclusions, of course, as well. And that's it. Once you're done, simply save your policy and return to the Settings menu, back to Managed Antivirus, and the secondary Settings menu to deploy. From here, we can deploy globally to servers or workstations, clients, or sites. I'll go back to our Settings menu to have a look at Web Protection. I simply scroll down and return to our protection policy. Again, we'll use the desktop policy as the example. This option is highly customizable. You'll see here you have a custom block page. This one's very generic, just says that the page has been blocked by your administrator. Probably want to customize that, make sure your end users know where they're coming from. And there's a simple slider here to control what level of risk you're willing to tolerate. Notice again here, this is a white label solution. Web Protection breaks all websites into categories, and you can filter from there. You'll notice right out of the gate that some are blocked by default. Those are under the legal liability category. Most others are allowed. You can tell that by the green check mark. If we expand productivity loss, you can see that most of those categories have been allowed, but social networks has been set according to a schedule. Businesses are sure to have all manner of different internal policies about social networking on a business computer, so there may be multiple policies that you need to create. It'll only take you a few minutes. If I do set one of these options to schedule, and you'll see here I can allow, block, or schedule any category, it will correspond with the scheduling tab here in the left menu. We've already configured this particular schedule to allow us a scheduled category both before, after work, on the weekends, and during the lunch hour. You can easily set custom whitelists and blacklists, and you can even get a customized bandwidth check. Just specify the appropriate threshold here, and then save your policy. Once again, we'd return to the settings menu, back to web protection and settings to roll out the feature accordingly. Now, Eric, you introduced these as parts of a layered security approach, and I think you're quite right. Can you tell us a little bit in your experience about specific use cases or perhaps how you work this into a sales model for your MSP?
So basically, like I said before, these are part of your layered security model, right? And the idea is to put up as many layers as you can between you and the threat actor, or your devices that you have under management and that threat actor. So things like web protection and MAV become those kind of final last layers of protection before you get to the end device. So with web protection, that kind of occurs before antivirus, right? So web protection helps so when the client actually goes and requests something that it shouldn't, something with a known bad reputation or from a category that you have specifically disallowed, then it will block that before it ever gets to the machine. Now, then AV, if something were to slip in through web filtering, because it's not content aware, right? It only goes based on what type of website the traffic is coming from and what the reputation of that website is. If there's something from a reputable site that it sees as a virus, that's where the managed antivirus is going to come in and go ahead and remove that. So it's important to explain the importance of those layers to your customers in order to sell the security model and the security importance to your customers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I'm sure that customers today are as security aware as ever. So I have to believe that can only help the MSP in their sales model.
Absolutely. Security is one of the number one things that as a IT services provider, you need to make sure you are providing for your customers. It's also one of the biggest reasons that MSP customers churn. So if you don't have good security around your customers, you're just risking them churning later on due to some type of security incident.
Fantastic. We should also point out that once features like managed antivirus and web protection are enabled, they will get extra tabs here in the south pane as well. So if I select the antivirus tab, I can see any threats if they've been detected, the results of scans, have actions like emptying my quarantine, so on and so forth. Also, the Web Protection tab, it's just a simple way to sort the web requests by the day, by the website, or by category. There's also some helpful functionality from the south pane as well, especially with Web Protection. If a certain site that should be allowed is being blocked, you can very quickly select it and add it to a custom whitelist right there on the fly. Now that we're done with Managed Antivirus and Web Protection, we'll turn on to the next feature of the Remote Management Dashboard.
In this session, we're going to be talking about NetPath. Now, NetPath is a diagnostic tool that helps you monitor the connectivity between your end users' devices and the cloud services that they're using and everything in between. Daniel, can you show us a little bit more about how NetPath works?
Absolutely. So to access NetPath, you have two options. You can select View from the top menu and scroll down to NetPath, or you can use the quick navigation pane that's on the left of your screen. Now, just to clarify, a path, as we're using the term, is the connection between one of your devices that's already monitored in the dashboard and any specified URL or IP address. So you can see we have some test ones already set up. All I'm going to do is click on the path. This gives you a very insightful, high-level graphical representation of that connection. On the left is our device, and we see all the hops between that and the specified URL. Think of this as a proactive GUI-based traceroute. Now, if I start running traceroute and there's an issue, I can only diagnose it in what's going on right now. NetPath, as you can see in this graph here at the bottom, stores historical information. So if there's an issue, I'm able to look back in time and determine exactly what was happening at that moment. So if I click here where the graph was red, I can see that the ultimate destination simply wasn't responding. But the internal network, everything seems to be functioning perfectly. Now, Eric, how does this compare to the tools that you've used in the past in your own MSP experience?
So like you said, this pretty much replaces the trace route of old, right? Where a customer would call up, they'd say, hey, I can't connect to xyz.com, and you'd log into their machine, you'd run a trace route, see what was going on, and of course, most of the time, you couldn't see what was going on and what was failing. But they might call you back 15 minutes later and say, hey, it's not working again. Well, NetPath solves that problem, right? By storing that historical data and allowing you to see the multiple pathways that it's taking to get certain places, it allows you to very quickly be able to diagnose the exact point on the route in between the endpoint and xyz.com to know who to call, know where the problem is, whether it's an internal or an external problem, ISP problem, etc. Very, very helpful in diagnosing those transient problems.
Well, very good. Now, what does that actually translate to in terms of productivity and profitability for you as the MSP?
So in terms of productivity, right, it means technicians don't have to wait around for something to break again once a customer complains about it one time. They can simply go back, figure out what the problem was, and then start addressing it rather than having to wait for it to break again. In terms of profitability, obviously efficiency turns into profitability. We know that. But in terms of profitability for your customer and you, it dramatically reduces the amount of time that it takes to diagnose this type of problem. And many times you'll actually be alerted and see these problems occurring before your customer knows, so that you can start applying fixes or suggesting upgrades before it starts becoming a problem that actually degrades their performance to the point where it causes them downtime.
That's fantastic insight. Thank you so much. It's a tremendously useful tool. Can't wait to dive in just a little bit further with the remote management dashboard.
In this session, we're going to be talking about automation. Now, automation is a really important part of any IT service provider's tool belt, and we're going to show you how that works in the RMM dashboard.
Thank you very much, Eric. Yeah, we can't really talk about this product without talking about automation. It's a great strength of the product. I'm going to start by automating based on check behavior. So there's all manner of checks that are running on your managed devices. These are customizable. Today, we're going to focus on a simple example. This is a disk space check for the C drive. You can see here it simply tells me the total amount of space in the drive and how much remains is free. If I just right-click the check, I can edit the check and take a look at the threshold that I have set there. We'll leave that alone for now at 15%. The question is, what can we automate based on a condition? So this C drive has crossed its 15% threshold. What can we do? I'm going to right-click and assign a task. There are quite a few pre-built automated tasks already inside the product. This is a disk space check, so we want to try to free up some space. So let's try that by cleaning up the temp files. See, I can get as granular as I would like in my selections, whether it's just some log files, some of those system temp files, or we can just take it all. The last thing that we'll do is specify a maximum execution time. It does default to 1 hour, which should be more than sufficient to delete a few files. Once I click Finish, anytime that check fails, those temp files will be automatically deleted. That's a simple example, but you can imagine there's quite a few applications. You saw part of the extensive list there, and you see now that task has been assigned to this particular check, and it will trigger on the check failure. Eric, are there any other basic examples or maybe just general categories where people can use these types of automated behaviors on a check failure that would be useful to them as the MSP?
Well, there's all different kinds of things that you can do here, right? The disk space check happens to be probably the one that we see most prevalently. So there's a lot of things we can do with automation and self-healing. The most obvious one is the one that you've shown us with the disk space check. That's usually the example that we use most often. But there's also some self-healing built into some of the checks themselves. So the Windows service checks in particular have automatic or have settings inside of them that allow you to set those up to start and restart services if they're found to not be started at some point. So that's a good example as well of some self-healing. Doesn't even require an extra task to build.
But it's still an automated behavior.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there's a myriad of things we can build with Automation Manager in order to create self-healing tasks as well.
Absolutely. So we've seen the pre-built automated tasks in that menu that came up just a moment ago, but we also have what's called the Automation Manager. So if I navigate back to settings from my top menu and I scroll down to the Script Manager, here you can see some of our engineers have been very busy creating lots of custom scripts. If you're a scripter already, just click New and you can upload in a variety of supported formats. It's all the basics, and you can put all the custom scripts in your dashboard that you would like. Now, for those of us out there, myself included, that are not Ninja scripters already, we have the Automation Manager, which is a free download right here inside the Script Manager.
And even if you are a script ninja, as you so put it, you may find that building policies in Automation Manager is actually more efficient sometimes than hard coding it yourself.
No, absolutely. That's because it is a nice and easy drag and drop interface. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring up the Automation Manager. It looks just like this. So everything works within a policy, and we're going to use drag and drop building blocks, if you will, from this left-hand menu. You see there's too many options to name right now. We're going to drag these over here into our policy builder and create a policy. So, Eric, we were talking just before we started the recording about a common practice for MSPs when they take over new clients. Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So as opposed to self-healing scripts, which obviously happen when something fails, there's another category of automation that we like to talk about, and that's onboarding. So when you onboard a new client, there's a lot of things that you may do, from setting configurations to deploying certain software. So what we decided we would show you today is how to set up a local admin user on all your devices to make sure that you as the MSP have local admin access through a unique set of credentials to all of your clients' devices.
Very good. So if we're going to be creating a user, a local user, then I assume I can just start with a local user.
Yes, but the first thing we want to do is we want to find out if that local user exists.
Absolutely. So we have local user exists. Here's one of our building blocks. So I'll just drag this into the middle of the policy builder.
That's correct. And now it's going to ask you for a username. Now, there's two things we can do here. We can go ahead and type in a username if you're going to use the same user across all your devices. However, actually, why don't we show them how to create an input parameter so that they can actually pass this from RMM into their policy.
Absolutely. So it won't be typing it directly then.
Yep. So just go ahead and hit
use
on
our
input.
Input parameters. We'll add ourselves a new one. And we'll create our username.
And the reason we do this is so that if you wanted to create a different username for each client so that you weren't using the same username across multiple clients, which actually is a best practice, so this would be the recommended way to do it, you can. And that way you can reuse this script, but when you deploy it to one client versus another, then you can make that username different.
Fantastic. So now that we've got our username created here, we'll just click OK. Click OK again. And now we're back to where we started here with the local user exists. So instead of typing directly, I can just click the link icon here, go to input parameters, and select that username that we've just created.
Correct. Just like that.
All right. So now we've checked to see if our preferred local username exists. What's the next step?
So the next thing is we need to check that result, right? So what we're going to want to do is find an if-else object and drag that into our picture.
So I have my if-else object. I've dragged it into place. So how do we explain to the Automation Manager what we're checking for?
So in that first field, we want to go ahead and click on the little link icon and take that to,
So as you can see, the objects populate based on what we've already put in. And then this is going to be a conditional statement. It either exists or it does not.
Correct. So now what we want to do is we want to look at the condition, and this could go either way, right? Because we have a then and an else. So in logically, what we're trying to do is find out if the user exists, and if it doesn't, then do something.
Right.
So in this case, I would say does not equal.
Right. We'll start with the negative.
And does not equal true. Now, something to make a point of here in the interface is you saw where there's a value there, and it's kind of grayed out. That is an example of a value, not a default. So if we want to make this true, we actually do need to type in true there, or we're going to get an error when we try and run this script.
There we have it. So if our local user does not exist, that is, it does not equal true, then what are we going to do? We'll have to create it. So I'd simply go back to my search bar, and we've got our create local user. And I can drag that in place in our simple if-then logic.
And just like Daniel's doing, you would go in and you would link that username to the one that we put in the input parameters. Now, what we did not specify is we did not specify a password input yet. So we need to go back up to our input and add one for that as well.
We'll pick a very secure password no one would ever guess.
Well, this is just the display and the name of the variable, not the actual. And we actually can't put a value here because remember, you need to change the type to password instead. A couple of things here. You noticed that we could not type in a value for the password directly into the script. Automation Manager will not let you type in plain text a password to be used as a password by an object. It also, we have the password field as a separate type because those password fields are encrypted in the script as well as in the log files. So it is never shown to the end user so that it can be used in a different way.
Yeah, that's excellent. Good practical security. We'll just give him a simple description. Fantastic. So we've checked to see for the presence of that local user. We can create it if it doesn't exist, but we're still not done because that user is not an administrator yet, which is what the MSP is going to need. So what is the next step?
So the next step would obviously be to create or to move or add that local user to a local group.
So all I have to do is start typing add local. It's right here at the top for me. So that's going to be our next step. We're going to add our username. The group name will be the administrators. And I don't think we have to bother with a domain for this example.
Correct.
All right. What do we have to do, Eric, to finish our script?
So we've taken care of if the user does not exist, right? Mm-hmm. So we've taken care of that part. Now, in our example here, what we're going to do with the else, or if the user does not exist, is we're basically going to do nothing. But there's a couple of things we want to do, even though we're doing nothing. So to make the output of the Automation Manager policy more readable, as well as give an indication in the dashboard that it did not work. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find the log object, which is simply log, and we're going to drag that into our else statement. And we're just going to put a message in here that says something like warning, user does not exist. Now what this means is that when you run this script and the user does exist, it's going to come through and it's going to show you that the user does not or does in fact exist, and then we just don't want to do anything with it. Because if the user already exists, we don't want to change anything.
Fantastic. So we've got our warning in if the user was found to exist based on our first if-else statement. I haven't studied much coding, but I have studied a little bit, and I think we need to polish off the end of this process over here.
We do. So in addition to the log statement to add that text to all the stuff that gets returned back to the RMM dashboard, we want to actually show this is a failure in the RMM dashboard. So we want to look for the fail policy object. There we go. And just drag that into our else statement. And what this is going to do is it's going to cause the task or the automation manager policy to actually show as a failure in the dashboard when it runs, so that we know there's something that we have to pay attention to.
It's our way to keep the results meaningful.
Correct.
Now, Eric, we're sitting here talking through each option in detail, and of course, we already kind of know our way around this product, but it's really not that hard to use. Someone who is an amateur coder at best, or worse, can jump right into this solution and start coding. What does this, in terms of just possibilities, capabilities for the MSP, what doors does this open?
It opens up tons of doors because these are easy things to do. This is obviously one of those tasks that you'd want to do and be able to repeat every time you onboard a customer. But think of an automation policy like this, but add to it deployment of power settings or software. Because we do have objects that allow you to download software and then run those installations, or use other things. And we have a cookbook of a whole bunch of these that you can just download from the Success Center and use as well, or modify specifically to meet your use. So it's a great way, without having to know any scripting, to build basic to advanced automations for your RMM dashboard in terms of onboarding, self-healing, as well as project work.
Oh, fantastic. The possibilities really are endless. There's so much that you can add to your business by leveraging a tool like this. Once you've got your policy created, everything is as you would like it to be. Simply return to your dashboard. You save the policy, of course, in Automation Manager. We return to Settings and our Script Manager. That Automation Manager will save as an AMP file, and you see that here in our supported formats. You simply load it up as an automated task, and you can deploy it to your dashboard globally to servers or workstations, or to any client site or device. We hope you've enjoyed the demo of the remote management dashboard. Please be in touch with our sales rep for more details, or start your trial today at SolarWindsMSP.com.